Lucky me, I get to talk about net neutrality. Now, I hate talking about net neutrality, and it's the same reason I hate talking about climate change, because there is such an obvious right and wrong side of the issue, and unless I'm sitting on $1 million to pay for lobbyists, it feels like my voice doesn't really make much of a difference. But this is an important topic to talk about, and luckily, at the end, I get to inject some hope into the discussion, and maybe not just leave you with the sad reality that today the FCC has voted to repeal the net neutrality restrictions that are not just reversing an Obama-era order, and in fact are reversing policies that have been in place since the dial-up era. So it's important to note that everyone is against this. Left, right, center, it doesn't matter what your political ideology is. Repealing net neutrality protections is a bad thing. And Ajit Pai, the FCC chairman, has tried to complicate the discussion by bringing Obama into it and saying that they're just repealing Obama-era policy. But that's not true. Net neutrality is just keeping the internet the way it's always been. And by repealing the restrictions, it allows ISPs to nickel and dime you by restricting content that you may not have access to unless you pay extra for it. So this doesn't benefit anybody except the ISPs, which, of course, Ajit Pai used to work for Verizon. So you can understand why his thoughts on net neutrality would be skewed by a company that will directly benefit from the repeal of those rules. And in addition to that, Congress took $101 million in donations from the ISP industry, which also includes Comcast, AT&T, and others. Now, even though the FCC voted to repeal net neutrality, there were two FCC commissioners that voted against it, and that was Jessica Rosenworcel and Minion Clyburn. Now, I'm going to show you parts of each of their speeches that where they spoke on it before they actually voted.
Net neutrality is internet freedom. I support that freedom. I dissent from this rash decision to roll back net neutrality rules. I dissent from the corrupt process that has brought us to this point, and I dissent from the contempt this agency has shown our citizens in pursuing this path today. This decision puts the Federal Communications Commission on the wrong side of history, the wrong side of the law, and the wrong side of the American public.
I dissent because I am among the millions outraged. Outraged because the FCC pulls its own teeth, abdicating responsibility to protect the nation's broadband consumers. Now, some may ask, why are we witnessing such unprecedented groundswell of public support for keeping the 2015 net neutrality protections in place? Because the public can plainly see that a soon-to-be toothless FCC is handing the keys to the internet, one of the most remarkable, empowering, enabling inventions of our lifetime, over to a handful of multi-billion-dollar corporations. And if past is prologue, those very same broadband internet service providers that the majority says you should trust to do right by you will put profits and shareholders' returns above what is best for you.
So some strong words from two commissioners who are the only ones on the correct side of this issue. Now, there was a reaction to Clyburn's speech from FCC Chairman Ajit Pai that sort of irked me.
Amen to that, Mr. Chairman. Amen to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. I'm going to mark you down as a no. So that's it.
This sums up Ajit Pai's demeanor throughout this whole process. This has all just been a joke to him. Now, after this vote, or even before this vote, there has been pushback from the states. So the governor of Washington has said that they will act under their own laws and their own jurisdiction to protect net neutrality. And in addition to that, following the FCC vote, the Washington Attorney General said that they plan to sue the FCC over the net neutrality repeal, as does New York, as does many other states. And California is another state that is doing whatever it can to push back against this repeal, with California State Senator Scott Weiner posting this video.
Hi, I'm Scott Weiner. I'm a California State Senator. Today, the FCC eliminated net neutrality. This is a big problem for our democracy. So in January, when the California legislature goes back in session, I'm going to introduce legislation to adopt net neutrality as a requirement in California. Net neutrality is so important for a free and open internet. Without net neutrality, we can have a situation where it's easier to access websites that pay money and harder to access websites that don't pay money. If we want to have a great democracy, which we deserve, we need a free and open internet, and that means net neutrality.
Now, while many states are doing whatever they can to keep net neutrality alive, there is also another potential avenue to keep net neutrality, and that's through a public option. More than 450 communities now have full or partial publicly owned networks, often referred to as municipal or community broadband, including 40 in 13 states that offer high-speed 1 gigabit services. In Chattanooga, the city's publicly owned electric power board, for instance, has been operating a fiber network since 2009 and was the first location in the U.S. to offer a 1 gigabit service. The emergence of a community broadband network in the city has also forced the corporate provider, Comcast, to invest in upgrading their service, even as EPB provides faster speeds and lower costs. So, municipal-run broadband, or what I like to call the public option, is a potential to keep net neutrality alive, as it keeps the internet out of the hands of corporate ISPs. Now, there has been a lot of success with this model. Cedar Falls has one of the oldest community-owned networks in the country, and with recent upgrades, is now one of the fastest. In addition to having higher speed connections than neighboring communities in Iowa, the publicly owned network's more than 11,000 subscribers pay around $200 less per year. In Wilson, the community broadband network became profitable nearly a year ahead of schedule, ensuring that Time Warner keeps its prices down in order to compete. Between 2007 and 2009, Time Warner raised its rates in, quote, non-competitive neighboring jurisdictions, where it exists as a monopoly, as much as 52%, but kept prices stable in Wilson. A similar situation occurred in Lafayette when the city began running its own fiber network in 2009, after raising rates 6 times in the 4 years preceding a 2007 vote on a publicly owned network. Cox Communications subsequently kept rates the same for 3 years, yet was still unable to match the lower cost publicly owned service. It is estimated that the publicly owned network in Lafayette will save consumers and businesses between $90 million and $100 million in just its first 10 years of operation. So not only does municipal broadband work, but it thrives. You have lower costs with higher speeds, and because of the increased competition, it forced the corporate ISPs in the area to actually lower their costs and improve their services. Now, you'd think that conservatives would be on board for this because, increased competition means better results for the consumer. But of course, they don't actually care about increased competition. They only care about what their donors want. And many of their donors, of course, are large corporate ISPs, and they've been actively fighting against this. Recognizing the threat of efficient, lower-cost, publicly owned competitors, corporations have gone on the offensive, with support from the right-wing American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC, and Republican lawmakers. 19 states have enacted laws banning or restricting local municipalities from engaging in such wealth and access democratizing initiatives. At closed-door ALEC meetings, state legislators sit down with lobbyists for corporations like AT&T, Time Warner Cable, Verizon, Comcast, and News Corp to be handed changes to our laws that further the right-wing agenda and directly benefit the corporate bottom line. Now, in case you have any doubt about ALEC's intentions, their CEO is Lisa B. Nelson, who, before running government relations for Visa, managed a team of both federal and state policy lobbyists for AOL and Time Warner. And that's straight off the ALEC website. Now, while the Republican Party is obviously at the forefront of large corporate interests, I'm not going to pretend like the Democratic Party are a bunch of angels, because Ajit Pai, while being designated as FCC chairman under the Trump administration, was initially appointed to the FCC by Barack Obama. So obviously there's plenty of blame to go around. Now, I want to end on a tweet that gives you sort of a look at just the larger picture of what a move like this by the FCC really means for the future of politics. Tweeted out by Hannah Fertig, she writes, "It warms my heart to hear the high schoolers on the bus being radicalized by the net neutrality vote. Get ready for the next generation of voters." So while it seems like every day is bad news after bad news, keep in mind that this is radicalizing a younger generation of voters, and radicalizing for the good. So they are already more progressive, but they're also more inclined to socialism, and that's because of the years of corporate overreach that have affected our politics.